Orson Driftwood did not like the sound of Docking Ring 9. The vibration was too low. It was a rhythmic, heavy thrum that bypassed the ears and settled straight into the marrow of his teeth. That was the sound of a Rethkul heavy cruiser. It was the sound of a ship that weighed 10 times more than the station's mooring clamps were rated for. Orson adjusted the tension on the hydraulic stabilizers. He watched the digital readout on his battered console. The numbers flickered in amber. 34% overcapacity. 36%. He spat a sunflower seed shell into a plastic cup. "Benton," Orson said into his comms, "tell our guests to cut their thrusters. They are going to peel this ring off the station like a scab." Benton Harrow replied from the security deck. His voice was flat, professional. He told Orson that the Rethkul were not interested in station safety. They were interested in the mandate. The airlock cycled with a hiss that sounded like a dying lung. The pressure differential was off by 3 points. Orson felt his eardrums pop. He stood up from his swivel chair and wiped grease onto a rag. He was 52 years old. He had spent 30 of those years fixing things that other people broke. He did not have the patience for high-altitude politics. High Arbiter Rethkul stepped onto the deck. The alien stood 7 feet tall. His skin was the color of wet slate and looked just as hard. He wore a suit of pressurized plates that clicked with every step. The Rethkul did not breathe the station's recycled air. He carried his own atmosphere in a tank on his back. Behind him, 2 smaller drones hovered. They were recording everything. "Orson Driftwood," the Rethkul said. The voice came through a translator mounted on his chest. It sounded like 2 grinding stones. "You are the primary custodian of this sector." "I'm the guy who keeps the lights on," Orson said. "And right now your ship is drawing 40 kilowatts just to stay clamped. Cut the power or pay the surcharge." The Rethkul did not blink. He did not have eyelids. He held up a data pad. The screen glowed with the sigil of the Galactic Accord. "We are not here for commerce," Rethkul stated. "We are here for an inspection of your kinetic defense grid. Specifically, the Mark 7 pulse cannons mounted on the outer rim." Orson leaned against a cooling pipe. It was vibrating. "Those are for debris. We get a lot of wandering ice in this belt. If we don't vaporize the big chunks, they punch holes in the mess hall." "The Galactic Accord, Section 42, Subsection 9, the Rethkul recited, prohibits the use of variable yield kinetic energy in civilian sectors. Your cannons have been modified. They possess a recoil dampening system that violates the laws of proportional response." Orson looked at the alien. He looked at the drones. He knew the game. The Rethkul were expansionists who used bureaucracy as a siege engine. If they could prove the station was militarized, they could legally seize it under the Safety and Security Act. Benton Harrow walked into the room. He kept his hands visible. He was a younger man, but he had the eyes of someone who had seen a lot of vacuum. He stood next to Orson. He didn't speak. He just watched the drones. The Rethkul moved toward the main terminal. He moved with a heavy, deliberate grace. He tapped a sequence into the interface. A holographic schematic of the station appeared. It was glowing red in several areas. "Explain the thermal signature in the secondary bay," Rethkul demanded. "Our long-range scans show a heat spike consistent with the charging of forbidden capacitors." "That's the laundry," Orson said. He didn't crack a smile. "The dryers are old. They run hot. If you want to seize a bunch of clean jumpsuits, be my guest." The Rethkul turned his head. It was a slow, mechanical movement. "Humor is a defense mechanism. It will not serve you here. We have reports of a human vessel, the Iron Oak, engaging in combat near the Orion Spur. They used tactics that bypassed the standard engagement protocols. They ignored the laws of surrender." "I don't know any Iron Oak," Orson lied. He knew the ship. Every human in the sector knew it. It was a freighter that had been turned into a hornet's nest. Humanity was invited into the accord on the condition of compliance. The Rethkul continued. You are a young species. You are violent. You are unrefined. We created the combat law to ensure that war remains a controlled, predictable endeavor. Your people treat war like a broken machine. You try to fix it by breaking everything else. The Rethkul stepped closer to Orson. The smell of ozone and cold metal came off his suit. We have analyzed your station's logs. You have installed a gravity well generator in the docking bay. That is a violation of the Third Treaty of Solvrek. It is a weapon of mass disruption. It's a docking aid, Orson said. It helps the heavy haulers come in straight. Without it, the drift would slam them into the hull. It's about engineering, not war. It is about capability, Rethkul corrected. The capability to trap a ship. The capability to crush a hull. You have built a fortress and called it a gas station. Benton Harrow cleared his throat. The treaty allows for necessary safety measures in high-density asteroid fields. We are in a high-density field. Check your charts. The Rethkul ignored the security officer. He looked back at Orson. Your species is being summoned to the High Council. The Iron Oak incident was the final straw. You claimed the Rethkul violated combat law first. You claimed we used excessive force during the blockade of the VAR system. Orson finally allowed himself a small, dry chuckle. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metallic component. It was a burnt-out fuse. He tossed it onto the table between them. It made a sharp, lonely sound against the metal. You guys love your laws, Orson said. You have a law for how many shots we can fire. You have a law for how thick our armor can be. You even have a law for what color our distress flares should be. You spent 5,000 years making sure war was a gentleman's game. The Rethkul straightened his posture. Order is the only thing that prevents total annihilation. Order is a luxury, Orson replied. We didn't have 5,000 years of peace to write books about how to kill each other politely. We spent our history trying not to die from the cold, the hunger, or the guy next door. The Rethkul's drones buzzed louder. They were sensing the shift in the room. The air felt heavier. The vibration from the cruiser outside changed pitch. It was pulling on the station now, testing the strength of the metal. You are being cited for 312 violations, the Rethkul stated. Your station is now under the temporary administration of the Rethkul hegemony. You will surrender your tools and your codes. Orson Driftwood looked at the digital clock on the wall. It was 1400 hours. He was supposed to be off shift in 10 minutes. He looked at the Rethkul. Then, he did something that the aliens' database flagged as a high-level anomaly. Orson smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who knew exactly where the structural weaknesses of the room were. It was the smile of a mechanic who had just found the one bolt that would bring the whole engine down. You keep saying we violated your combat laws, Orson said softly. You keep saying we don't play by the rules. You do not, Rethkul said. That is why you are being sanctioned. Well, Orson said, leaning forward until his face was inches from the alien's visor. That's why we made ours, and you aren't going to like the fine print. Outside, the station's hull groaned. A proximity alarm began to wail. It wasn't a warning for an incoming ship. It was a warning from the docking ring. Orson hadn't been fighting the Rethkul's ship with the stabilizers. He had been calibrating the station's rotation to match the cruiser's harmonic frequency. Benton, Orson said. Release the clamps. Clamps released, Benton replied. The station didn't just let go, it kicked. The magnetic repulsion system, designed for emergency separation, fired with the force of 1,000 sledgehammers. The Rethkul cruiser, caught in its own heavy-handed docking procedure, was shoved violently into the path of a passing nickel-iron asteroid. The station shuddered. The lights flickered. The Rethkul stumbled, his heavy suit clanging against the deck. That, Orson said, checking his watch, was a safety maneuver. Section 12 of the station handbook. Always clear the path for incoming debris. The Rethkul looked at his datapad. His ship was signaling a hull breach. The debris had taken out his primary shield generator. "This is an act of war," Rethkul hissed. "No," Orson said. "This is a maintenance issue, and you're trespassing." The silence that followed the impact was not absolute. It was filled with the dying echoes of stressed titanium and the frantic high-pitched whine of the Rethkul's internal suit processors. Orson Driftwood stood his ground. He felt the deck beneath his boots tilt exactly 4 degrees to the port side before the station's gyros fought back. The floor groaned. It was a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the soles of his work boots. High Arbiter Rethkul did not fall. His pressurized suit used magnetic soles to lock onto the deck. The sound of the metal-on-metal contact was like a gunshot in the small room. The alien's slate-colored face was unreadable, but the 3 drones hovering around his head were spinning with agitated speed. Their sensors glowed a sharp, angry violet. "You have crippled a diplomatic vessel," Rethkul said. His voice was a rasping buzz, translated through the speaker on his chest. "That is a violation of the Galactic Accord, Article 42, Section 9. You have initiated unprovoked hostilities." Orson didn't look at the alien. He looked at the amber screen of his console. He tapped a sequence of keys. The keys were mechanical. They clicked with a satisfying heavy weight. "Article 42 covers intentional ramming," Orson said. He didn't raise his voice. He kept it low. "I didn't ram you. I released a faulty docking clamp. If your pilot decided to park a heavy cruiser in the middle of an active debris field without checking the local weather report, that is a pilot error. Check your own logs. I logged a warning about the harmonic resonance 5 minutes ago." "A warning we did not receive," the Rethkul countered. "The station's broadcast antenna is currently undergoing scheduled maintenance," Orson replied. He finally looked up. "It's in the logs. You should have read the bulletin before you tried to hook your ship to my house." Benton Harrow's voice came through the overhead speakers. It was crisp. "Orson, the cruiser is venting coolant. They are losing pressure in their primary bay. They are requesting emergency reattachment." Orson wiped a smudge of oil off the console with his thumb. "Negative, Benton. Tell them the docking ring is structurally compromised. If they try to touch us again, the whole section will shear off. They need to back away another 500 meters. "They are refusing to move," Benton said. "They are claiming sovereign right to the airlock." Orson looked at the Rethkul. The alien was standing perfectly still, too still. "Your security officer is lying," Rethkul said. "Our scans show the docking ring is functional at 82% capacity. You are obstructing a legal inspection. This is the 3rd time you have manipulated local conditions to evade compliance." "I'm not evading anything," Orson said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal multi-tool. He began to tighten a loose screw on the side of his monitor. "I'm following the Human Occupational Safety and Health Code. It's a very long book. We wrote it because space is trying to kill us every second of every day. If I let your ship back in here while it's leaking volatile gases, I risk an explosion that kills everyone on this station. My law says I can't do that." "Your law is irrelevant to the hegemony," Rethkul hissed. "That's the problem," Orson said. "You think war is the only thing that needs rules. You think because you stopped shooting each other a few millennia ago, you've mastered the universe. But you forgot about the work. You forgot about the grease and the friction. You forgot about what happens when things break." The station gave another shudder. This one was different. It was a sharp, jagged vibration. "Ferris Oakland to control." A new voice crackled over the comms. Ferris was the junior engineer down in the gut of the station. He sounded tired. "Orson, we've got a thermal spike in the heat exchangers. The Rethkul ship is dumping its excess core heat directly toward our radiators. They're trying to cook us out." Orson's eyes narrowed. This was a classic Rethkul move. It wasn't combat. It was environmental pressure. They weren't firing lasers. They were just being uncomfortably loud with their engine output. It was a bureaucratic way of strangling a station. "Ferris, shut down the external radiators," Orson commanded. "If I do that, the internal temp will hit 110 degrees in 20 minutes, Ferris replied. "Do it anyway," Orson said, "and open the bypass valves on the secondary cooling loop. Send the excess heat into the docking ring's internal atmosphere." The Rethkul straightened his posture. "That area is currently occupied by my boarding party. They are waiting in the umbilical." Orson checked his watch. "Then I suggest you tell them to move, or put on their thermal liners. It's about to get very tropical in there." The alien took a step forward. The drones dived lower, their sensors now a deep, pulsing red. "You are intentionally endangering the lives of hegemony officials." "No," Orson said, his voice flat and cold. "I am managing a thermal crisis. If you don't like the way I run my station, you are free to leave. But as long as you are docked, or trying to dock, you fall under my jurisdiction. And my jurisdiction says that the survival of the station's core takes precedence over the comfort of uninvited guests." Benton Harrow spoke again. He sounded almost amused. "Orson, the Rethkul boarding party is retreating to their ship. They seem to have found the temperature increase disagreeable." "Copy that," Orson said. "Ferris, keep those valves open until the cruiser backs off another 100 meters. Orson turned back to the high arbiter. The alien was staring at him through the translucent visor. For the first time, Orson saw a flicker of something that wasn't arrogance. It was confusion. The Rethkul were used to empires. They were used to fleets and grand declarations. They weren't used to a man in a grease-stained jumpsuit using a plumbing manual as a weapon. "You think this is clever," Rethkul said. "You think you can win a war with technicalities." "I'm not trying to win a war," Orson said. He sat back down in his chair. The springs squeaked. "I'm trying to finish my shift, but you see, that's the thing about humans. We didn't have a grand council to tell us how to behave. We had to learn the hard way that if you don't follow the rules of the machine eats you. We didn't make our laws to be polite. We made them because they were the only thing that kept the air in the room and the heat in the pipes." The Rethkul looked at the digital clock on the wall. It was 1408 hours. "You are 8 minutes past your shift," the alien observed. "I'm on overtime now," Orson said, "and my overtime rates are astronomical. You're going to hate the invoice." Outside, the Rethkul cruiser finally fired its thrusters, moving away from the station with a slow, begrudging grace. The heavy vibration in Orson's teeth finally stopped. He took a deep breath. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and old coffee. "Benton," Orson said into the comms, "seal the outer hatch and tell Taran Holtvik to get a welding crew out to Ring 9. We've got some scuffs to buff out." The high arbiter turned toward the airlock. He stopped at the threshold and looked back at Orson. "This is not over, Mechanic Driftwood. The hegemony will return with a full legal battalion." "Bring 'em," Orson said, picking up a clipboard. "I've got a whole shelf of manuals they haven't read yet." Orson Driftwood did not move from his console. He watched the thermal signatures on his screen fade from a violent violet to a steady, cooling blue. The Rethkul cruiser was now a silhouette against the distant, cold light of the system's primary star. It sat 100 meters out. It was close enough to be a threat, but far enough that its gravitic stabilizers weren't pulling the station's frame out of alignment. He reached for a thermos. The coffee inside was lukewarm and tasted like burnt rubber and battery acid. He took a sip anyway. "Ferris," Orson said, tapping his headset. Give me a status report on the exterior clamps of Ring 9. I felt a shudder when they backed off. Tell me they didn't snap a shear pin. Ferris Oakland's voice came through the static. He was down in the crawl space, 3 levels below the docking deck. Orson could hear the rhythmic clanging of a heavy wrench against a frozen valve. The primary pins held Orson, Ferris said, but the secondary hydraulic bypass is leaking fluid like a stuck pig. The Rethkul didn't just dock, they tried to anchor. Their magnetic locks were set to a dreadnought-class frequency. They nearly fused our receiver plates. Orson rubbed the bridge of his nose. Can we patch it? I can bypass the leak, Ferris replied, but the ring is dead for at least 12 hours. If another ship tries to come in hot, the whole assembly will just drift off into the void. Do what you can, Orson said, but stay off the hull. The Rethkul are still watching. I don't want them seeing a repair crew and thinking we're vulnerable. Copy that, Ferris said. I'll stay in the guts of the machine. Orson looked up. High Arbiter Rethkul was still standing by the airlock. The alien had not followed his boarding party back to the ship. He stood motionless, his slate-colored armor reflecting the flickering fluorescent lights of the corridor. The 2 drones hovering near his shoulders hummed at a frequency that made Orson's skin itch. It was a high-pitched electronic whine, the sound of a machine looking for a reason to fire. You are still here, Orson observed. I am a diplomat, Rethkul said. His voice was modulated through a translator, giving it a hollow metallic resonance. I do not flee because of a temperature fluctuation. I am here to deliver a formal notification of violation. Benton Harrow walked into the control room. The security chief looked tired. His uniform was crisp, but there were dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look at the alien. He looked at Orson. They're broadcasting on all open channels, Orson, Benton said. The Hegemony just filed a grievance with the Interstellar Trade Commission. They are accusing us of using unconventional environmental weaponry against a diplomatic envoy. Orson let out a short, dry bark of a laugh. Weaponry? I was venting heat. The station's core was redlining because their ship is too damn heavy. If they want to call a radiator a weapon, that's their business. It is not a matter of opinion, Rethkul interrupted. The alien stepped closer to the console. One of the drones turned its sensor eye toward Benton. Under the Galactic Accord, Section 42, any intentional manipulation of a station's internal atmosphere for the purpose of repelling a boarding party is classified as a chemical and thermal strike. You have violated the laws of combat, Mechanic Driftwood. Orson leaned back in his chair. The old leather groaned under his weight. He picked up a heavy steel-cased tablet from the desk. It was the Occupational Safety and Health Manual for Deep Space Habitats. It was 4 inches thick and held together by duct tape and spite. I don't know much about your Galactic Accord, Orson said, but I know this book. It was written by people who died in cold, dark places because someone else forgot to check a pressure seal. It says here in Section 9, Paragraph 4, that the station master has the absolute authority to prioritize structural integrity over all other protocols. That includes diplomatic comfort. The Hegemony does not recognize your local manuals, Rethkul said. We recognize the law of war. You used the environment as a tool of coercion. That is a war crime. We aren't at war, Benton Harrow said, his hand resting near his sidearm. We're in a maintenance dispute. The distinction is irrelevant, the alien replied. By engaging in these tactics, you have forfeited your status as a civilian outpost. You are now a combatant. And as a combatant, you are subject to the full weight of the Hegemony's reclamation fleet. Orson stood up. He was shorter than the Rethkul, but he had the solid, immovable presence of a man who had spent his life working against gravity. He walked over to the airlock controls and began punching in a sequence of commands. What are you doing? Rethkul asked. I'm checking the atmosphere in the umbilical, Orson said. Since you're still here, I assume you want to talk. And if we're going to talk about combat law, we might as well do it while I'm working. Varric Stonehall, you on the line? A new voice entered the comms. Varric Stonehall was the station's senior structural engineer. He was 70 years old and had a voice like grinding gravel. I'm here, Orson, Varric said. I'm looking at the stress fractures on the main pylon. The Rethkul cruiser's departure left us with a 3mm gap in the outer hull. It's not venting yet, but the pressure is dropping. Can we seal it from the inside? Orson asked. Negative, Varric said. The alloy is too thick. We need to apply a thermal patch from the exterior, but with that cruiser sitting right there, any EVA suit is going to look like a target. Orson looked at Rethkul. The alien's drones were still pulsing red. You heard the man, Orson said. We have a hull breach. Your ship caused it. Now, according to your combat law, if I send a man out there to fix that hole, is he a technician or a target? Rethkul's visor remained opaque. Any individual exiting the station during a state of heightened alert is classified as an active participant in the theater of operations. My ship's automated defenses will neutralize any perceived threat within the 100-meter perimeter. So you're saying you won't let us fix the hole you made? Benton said, his voice tightening. I am saying that the law is absolute, Rethkul replied. You violated the accord. Until a legal tribunal arrives to adjudicate the matter, this station is under blockade. Orson turned back to his console. He didn't look angry. He looked focused. He began pulling up a different set of schematics. These weren't for the docking ring. They were for the station's fire suppression system. You know, Rethkul, Orson said quietly, the problem with you folks is that you think laws are like walls. You think they're built to keep people out. But for us, laws are like schematics. They're just instructions on how a system is supposed to work. And when a system doesn't work, we don't just sit there and complain. We find a workaround. There is no workaround for a blockade, the alien said. That's where you're wrong, Orson said. He tapped a final command into the screen. Benton, tell Varric to get his crew into their suits. We're going to give the Rethkul a lesson in human engineering. Orson? Benton asked, confused. They'll shoot them down. No, they won't, Orson said. He looked at the High Arbiter. Because according to your own law of war, you can't fire on a medical or safety-critical operation during a life-threatening emergency. And I'm about to create a very, very big emergency. He pressed the enter key. Deep within the station, a series of high-pressure CO2 canisters began to vent directly into the ventilation shafts of Docking Ring 9. The sound was a low, guttural roar that vibrated through the floorboards. What have you done? Rethkul demanded, his drones dipping low in a defensive posture. I just triggered a station-wide fire alarm, Orson said, checking his watch. The sensors now detect a catastrophic blaze in this sector. By law, human law, and yours, I am now required to depressurize the entire corridor to prevent a station-wide explosion. That includes this room, Arbiter. I suggest you get back to your ship before the vacuum does the talking for me. The alarm began to blare, a harsh, rhythmic strobe light filling the room. The sound of the venting gas was deafening. Orson didn't flinch. He just watched the countdown on his screen. 45 seconds until the outer doors opened automatically. This is a deception, Rethkul shouted over the noise. No, Orson said, his voice calm in the middle of the chaos. This is maintenance. Now move. You're blocking the exit. The heavy magnetic plates of High Arbiter Rethkul's boots slammed against the deck plating. Each step was a dull, metallic thud that cut through the roar of the venting CO2. The alien did not run. His species did not possess a biological impulse for panic. Instead, he moved with a calculated predatory efficiency. He understood the physics of a vacuum. He understood that his pressurized suit could only withstand a hard decompression for so long before the seals on his joints failed. The High Arbiter reached the inner airlock of the Rethkul cruiser. He paused for a fraction of a second, his visor turned toward Orson. The red glow of the emergency strobes reflected off the opaque glass of the alien's helmet. He did not speak. He simply stepped inside. The heavy iris door of the ship spiraled shut with a sound like a guillotine blade hitting a chopping block. Orson Driftwood did not wait for the confirmation light. He slammed his palm against the override switch on his console. "Airlock sealed. Corridor 9 is isolated," Orson said. His voice was steady. He reached for a thermos of black coffee and took a slow, deliberate sip. The liquid was lukewarm and bitter. It tasted like a double shift. Benton Harrow stepped away from the wall. He adjusted the holster of his sidearm. His eyes were fixed on the pressure gauges. The needle was dropping fast. "You just lied to a high arbiter of the hegemony, Orson. You just triggered a false level 1 emergency. That is a capital offense in 3 different sectors." "I did not lie," Orson replied. He pointed a grease-stained finger at the screen. "Look at the thermal sensors. The friction from their docking clamps generated enough heat to scorch the insulation on the primary power lines. There was a smolder. A smolder is a fire. I just prioritized station safety over diplomatic protocol." Orson keyed the wideband frequency for the maintenance deck. "Varric, you are clear. The Arbiter is back in his tin can. You have a 30-minute window before the Rethkul ship's AI realizes the atmospheric pressure has stabilized. Get out there and weld that breach." Varric Stonehull's voice came through the speakers. It was a deep, gravelly baritone that sounded like 2 grinding stones. He confirmed the order. He said his team was already in the airlock. He mentioned that Kira Moss had the lead on the external patch. She had already prepped the magnetic resin injectors. Orson watched the external camera feed. The Rethkul cruiser, a massive slab of dark, jagged alloy, loomed just inches from the station's hull. It looked like a mountain made of obsidian. Below it, the hull of the station was buckled. A jagged tear, 4 feet long, was weeping frozen oxygen into the void. It looked like a silver mist under the station's floodlights. 4 figures in bulky yellow environmental suits drifted out from the maintenance hatch. They moved with the slow, rhythmic grace of people who spent more time in zero-G than on solid ground. They weren't soldiers. They didn't move with tactical precision. They moved with the economy of motion that came from knowing exactly how much oxygen cost per minute. Varric Stonehull led the way. He carried a heavy-duty plasma welder that looked like a repurposed industrial cannon. Behind him, Kira Moss lugged a pressurized canister of Grade A hull sealant. She signaled the team to anchor themselves. She made it clear that the vibration from the Rethkul engines was making the hull plating unstable. "Orson," Benton said. He was looking out the reinforced observation port. "The Rethkul ship is rotating its point defense turrets. They are tracking Varric." Orson didn't look up from his readouts. "Let them track. According to the Rethkul's own Manual of Engagement, Article 14, Section 6, a ship may not engage any entity performing essential life-preserving repairs during an active environmental catastrophe. If they fire, they violate the very law they came here to enforce. Rethkul is a bureaucrat. He won't pull the trigger unless he can justify the paperwork." On the screen, Varric reached the breach. He didn't use a delicate touch. He kicked a magnetic tether into the hull and braced his boots. The sparks from his welder began to fly. They weren't like sparks on Earth. In the vacuum, they were tiny, brilliant diamonds of molten metal that vanished instantly into the black. The station groaned. It was a low-frequency moan that traveled through the superstructure. The Rethkul ship was still pushing. It was using its mass to maintain its position, regardless of the damage it was doing to the station's frame. "He's trying to provoke us," Benton muttered. "He wants us to use the station's maneuvering thrusters to push back. Then he can claim we initiated a kinetic strike." "Then we won't push back," Orson said. He began typing a new sequence of commands. "We'll just get slippery." Orson accessed the docking ring's lubrication system. It was designed to keep the massive mooring clamps from seizing up in the extreme cold of space. He bypassed the safety limiters. He commanded the system to dump 500 gallons of industrial-grade synthetic grease directly into the interface between the Rethkul ship and the docking ring. Outside, a thick, translucent fluid began to spray from the station's nozzles. It coated the Rethkul's docking probe. It coated the station's clamps. In the vacuum, the grease didn't just sit there. It expanded into a slick, viscous film. The Rethkul cruiser began to slide. It was a slow, agonizing movement. The ship's automated station-keeping thrusters fired to compensate, but the grease had eliminated the friction that the Rethkul ship was using to hold the station hostage. The massive cruiser lurched. It was like a man slipping on a patch of ice. "What was that?" Varick's voice crackled in Orson's ear. "The hull just jumped 6 inches. Kira almost lost her tether." "Just a little maintenance, Varick," Orson said. "Keep welding. The Arbiter is finding out that gravity isn't the only thing that's a bitch in deep space." On the monitor, the Rethkul ship's turrets were spinning wildly. They were trying to find a target, but there was no weapon fire to return. There was only a lot of grease and a very frustrated pilot. Orson leaned back in his chair. He watched the pressure gauge for the breach area. It was starting to rise. Varick's patch was holding. "You know, Benton," Orson said, watching the amber lights on his console. "The Rethkul spend 500 years perfecting a law of war. They think it's the ultimate weapon. But they forgot one thing." "What's that?" Benton asked. "They forgot that laws are written by people who don't have to fix the machines," Orson said, "and the machines don't care about the law. They only care about how you treat them." The comms unit chirped. It was a high-priority signal from the Rethkul cruiser. The Arbiter's voice was tight. It was the sound of a being who was realizing that he was being outmaneuvered by a man with a wrench and a pot of coffee. "Station Lead Driftwood," Rethkul said. "Explain the discharge of organic lubricants. My ship's sensors indicate a massive violation of environmental safety protocols." Orson smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found a loophole the size of a jump gate. "Sorry, Arbiter," Orson said. The fire alarm triggered the emergency lubrication dump. It's a standard safety feature to prevent the clamps from welding shut during a thermal event. It's all in the station's technical manual. I can send you the 3,000-page PDF if you'd like to read it, but I should warn you, the font is very small. The silence on the other end of the comms channel lasted for exactly 12 seconds. Orson counted them by the rhythmic throb of the station's secondary coolant pump. It was a dull, heavy sound. It reminded him of a heart beating in a chest made of rusted iron. "Lead Driftwood," Rethkul's voice returned. It was lower now. The digital translation filter struggled to smooth out the jagged edges of the alien's growl. "You are obstructing a mandated inspection. Under the Galactic Accord, Section 9, any intentional interference with an Arbiter's vessel is classified as an act of kinetic hostility." Orson adjusted the headset. He felt a bead of sweat roll down the back of his neck. It was getting warm in the control booth. The life support system was diverting power to the external heaters to keep the grease from flash freezing into solid ice. "Hostility is a strong word, Arbiter," Orson said. He tapped a command into his screen. A schematic of the docking ring appeared. It showed the stress points in bright red. "I am looking at a massive malfunction in the automated maintenance system. My station is literally leaking its guts onto your hull. If anything, I should be filing a claim against your ship for triggering a system-wide failure with your unauthorized docking torque." Benton Harrow's voice cut in over the private security frequency. "Orson, they are moving. I have thermal signatures on the other side of Airlock 7. They are not waiting for the grease to clear. They are bringing a plasma cutter to the door." Orson did not blink. He watched the pressure readings for Airlock 7. "Benton, did we finish the scheduled atmospheric scrubbing in that sector?" "Not yet," Benton replied. The tanks are still pressurized with concentrated nitrogen. Perfect, Orson said. The Rethkul love their protocol. Tell them that Airlock 7 is currently a high-pressure oxygen-deprived zone for maintenance. If they cut through that door, the pressure differential will suck them into the corridor like a wet rag through a pipe. And since I have officially logged the maintenance status, any injury they sustain is legally their own fault for ignoring the warning lights. The warning lights are broken, Orson, Benton noted dryly. Then tell them to use their eyes, Orson snapped. The sign is taped to the door. I wrote it in permanent marker myself. Out on the hull, the situation was grittier. Varric Stonehall was braced against a structural rib of the station. His magnetic boots were the only thing keeping him from drifting into the black. The grease was everywhere. It was a shimmering, translucent mist that coated his visor. He wiped it away with a gloved hand, leaving a smear that distorted his vision. Orson, Varric grunted. The sound of his heavy breathing filled the comms. The cruiser is shifting. The grease made it slide, but now the mooring arm is twisting. If that arm snaps, it's going to whip around and take out the entire solar array. I need to stabilize the joint, but I can't get a grip. Everything is too slick. I see it, Varric, Orson said. He looked at the torsion sensors. The numbers were climbing. 42,000 foot-pounds of torque. 45,000. The station groaned. It was a deep, metallic scream that vibrated through the floorboards of the control room. Kira, Orson said, addressing the second welder. She made it clear she was not comfortable with the proximity to the Rethkul engines. Tell her to move to the secondary pivot. She needs to vent the hydraulic fluid from the arm. If we lose the pressure, the arm will go limp. The cruiser will drift, but it won't take the station's spine with it. She is on it, Varric reported. But the Rethkul are firing their lateral thrusters again. They are trying to force the ship back into alignment. They are fighting the grease, Orson. They are treating this like a wrestling match. They are treating it like a war, Orson corrected. That is their mistake. You do not fight a machine. You manage it. Orson turned his attention back to the main console. He opened the station's administrative log. He began typing with the speed of a man who had spent decades filling out insurance forms. He wasn't looking for a weapon. He was looking for a rule. Arbiter Rethkul, Orson said into the open channel. I am formally declaring Docking Ring 9 a hazardous work site under the Interstellar Safety and Health Administration guidelines. Per Article 42, all non-essential personnel must evacuate the immediate vicinity of a Class 5 lubricant spill. We are not personnel, Rethkul hissed. We are the law. The law still has to follow safety codes, Arbiter, Orson said. His voice was flat, unmoving. If your ship remains attached to that ring, you are technically a worksite obstruction. My automated systems are programmed to clear obstructions during an emergency. If you do not detach in the next 3 minutes, the station's computer will initiate an emergency jettison of the entire docking assembly. There was a pause, a heavy, pregnant silence. You would destroy your own docking ring? Rethkul asked. There was a hint of genuine confusion in his voice. It was the confusion of a warrior meeting a man who valued a clean spreadsheet more than a flag. It's insured, Orson said. He leaned back and took a slow sip of lukewarm coffee. And according to the fine print, if an arbiter's vessel is the cause of the jettison, the Rethkul hegemony is liable for the replacement costs. That is about 400 million credits, plus labor. I have already sent the preliminary invoice to your embassy on the moon. In the security hub, Benton Harrow watched the thermal feeds. The Rethkul team at Airlock 7 had stopped cutting. They were standing still. They were likely communicating with their commander. The threat of a kinetic strike was one thing. The threat of a 400 million credit administrative debt was something else entirely. They are backing off, Benton whispered. Not yet, Orson said. He watched the torsion gauge. It was at 58,000. The limit was 60. They are proud. They want to find a way to win without looking like they blinked. Orson. Varick's voice came through, strained and urgent. The arm is buckling. Kira hasn't reached the valve yet. If it snaps now, the debris is going to shred the cruiser's bridge. Orson's fingers danced over the keys. He didn't look at the external cameras. He looked at the physics. He looked at the math. "I'm dumping the ballast tanks in Sector 4, Orson announced. "What?" Benton asked. "That's our water supply." "It's gray water, Benton. Relax," Orson said. On the exterior of the station, 4 massive valves opened. Thousands of gallons of recycled wastewater erupted into the vacuum. In the sub-zero temperatures, the water instantly turned into a cloud of jagged ice crystals. The force of the vent acted like a low-output thruster. It pushed the station's main body 3 degrees to the port side. The shift was tiny, but it was enough. The angle of the twisted mooring arm changed. The tension dropped from 58,000 to 22,000 in a single second. The Rethkul cruiser, still coated in grease and now pelted by a blizzard of frozen wastewater, slid further away from the station's hull. "There," Orson said. He wiped his forehead. "The obstruction is clearing itself." The comms crackled. It was Rethkul. He sounded like he was choking on his own pride. "Lee Driftwood, this indignity will be noted in the final report." "Make sure you spell my name right," Orson said. "It's Driftwood, like the stuff that survives the ocean because it's too stubborn to sink." Orson watched as the Rethkul cruiser finally fired its main engines. It didn't move with the grace of a predator. It moved with the clumsy, wobbling gait of a ship that had been humiliated by plumbing and paperwork. As the massive vessel pulled away, the mooring arm snapped back into its neutral position with a violent shudder that rocked the entire station. "Varick, Kira," Orson said. "Get inside. The show is over. We have a lot of cleaning up to do." "Copy that, Orson," Varick said. He sounded exhausted. "But you're buying the first round of synthetic ale when we get off shift." "Put it on the Rethkul invoice," Orson replied. He closed the administrative log. The amber lights on his console finally turned green. The station was quiet again, except for the low, rhythmic thrum of the pumps. It was a good sound. It was the sound of things working. But Orson knew the Arbiter wasn't gone. He was just repositioning, and the Rethkul had a lot more laws in their book than just the ones about grease and water. Orson reached for a fresh bag of sunflower seeds. He had a feeling he was going to need the salt. The amber light on Orson's console did not stay green for long. It began to pulse a deep, rhythmic violet. That was the color of a formal diplomatic protest being logged into the station's black box. High Arbiter Rethkul was not finished. He was merely changing the theater of engagement from the docking ring to the courtroom. "Orson," Benton's voice came through the overhead speakers. "The cruiser is holding position at 2,000 yards. They are broadcasting on an open emergency frequency. Every ship within 3 sectors can hear this." Orson leaned back. His chair groaned under his weight. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metallic tool. It was a calibrated shim, used for fine-tuning fuel injectors. He began to clean the dirt from under his fingernails with the tip of it. "Put him through, Benton," Orson said. "Let's hear the poetry." The main screen flickered. The High Arbiter's face filled the display. The alien's slate-colored skin looked tight. His eyes were narrow slits of burning yellow. Behind him, the bridge of the Rethkul cruiser was a hive of activity. Officers in silver plating were shouting commands. "Lee Driftwood," the Arbiter hissed. The translation software struggled with the sibilance. "You have committed a Tier 1 violation of the Galactic Combat Accord. You have utilized unregulated chemical agents and industrial waste as offensive weaponry against a diplomatic vessel. This is a breach of the laws that govern all civilized conflict. Orson didn't look up from his fingernails. We aren't in a conflict, Arbiter. We're in a maintenance window. There is a difference. The distinction is irrelevant, Rethkul barked. By your own admission, you coated our hull in lubricants to negate our tractor beams. You then discharged biological waste to disrupt our sensors and propulsion. Under Section 42 of the Accord, these are classified as unconventional malice. Earth will be sanctioned. Your station will be seized as evidence. Benton stepped into the frame of the camera behind Orson. He looked worried. He looked like a man who was calculating the remaining years on his pension. He leaned down and whispered that the Rethkul were right about the letter of the law. The Accord was designed to keep war clean and predictable. It didn't account for grease and grey water. Orson finally looked at the screen. He didn't look angry. He looked bored. You're right, Arbiter. We did violate the Galactic Combat Accord. It's a very fine piece of writing. It covers everything from laser frequencies to the thickness of hull plating. But there's one problem. The Arbiter paused. He tilted his head. There is no problem. The law is absolute. The law is absolute for members of the galactic hegemony, Orson corrected him. He tapped a command on his keyboard. A thick document appeared on a secondary monitor. It was thousands of pages long. The header was stamped with the seal of the United Earth Engineering Corps. But when Earth joined the trade routes, we didn't just sign your papers, we filed our own. It's called the Industrial Defense Protocol. It was ratified 32 years ago. A local ordinance cannot supersede the Accord, Rethkul said. It's not an ordinance, Orson said. He popped a sunflower seed into his mouth and cracked it. It's a safety manual, see? The Accord is about how to fight a war. Our protocol is about how to keep a job site from blowing up. And according to Earth law, this station isn't a military outpost. It's a Class 5 hazardous environment. Orson scrolled through the document. He highlighted a paragraph in bright red. Section 9, Paragraph 12. Orson read aloud. In the event of an unauthorized boarding or docking by a vessel exceeding weight limits, the station lead is mandated to use any and all available materials to ensure the structural integrity of the facility. Failure to do so results in a personal liability of 50 million credits per life on board. The Arbiter's eyes darted as he read the translation. This is an administrative regulation. It has nothing to do with combat. Exactly, Orson said. A slow, tired smile spread across his face. It wasn't a smile of triumph. It was the smile of a man who had found the right wrench for a stripped bolt. That's why we made ours. You're trying to sue us for a war we aren't fighting. I'm just a foreman following safety codes. If I hadn't greased that arm, the station would have buckled. That's a safety violation. If I hadn't vented the gray water, the pressure would have ruptured the hull. That's a safety violation. Orson leaned forward, his face inches from the camera. If you fire on us, you aren't engaging an enemy. You're attacking a public utility during a declared emergency maintenance cycle. Under your own laws, that makes you liable for the full replacement cost of the station, plus the lost revenue of every trade ship in the sector for the next 10 years. The bridge of the Rethkul cruiser went silent. The officers stopped shouting. The High Arbiter looked at the numbers scrolling on his own consoles. He was a creature of rules. He lived by the book. And Orson had just hit him with a bigger book. The cost would be astronomical, the Arbiter whispered. 380 billion credits, give or take, Orson said. And my insurance company is much meaner than my government. They will hunt you down for every cent. They have lawyers who make you look like a kindergarten teacher, Arbiter. Benton let out a breath he had been holding for 5 minutes. He looked at Orson with a new kind of respect. It wasn't the respect you gave a hero. It was the respect you gave a man who knew exactly how to cheat on his taxes and get away with it. You humans, Rethkul said, his voice dripping with a mix of disgust and awe. You do not respect the glory of battle. You treat existence like a ledger. Glory doesn't fix a broken docking ring, Orson replied. Now, are you going to clear my airspace? Or do I need to file a formal complaint about your ship's unauthorized hovering? It's 50 credits a minute starting 5 minutes ago. The High Arbiter didn't say another word. He signaled his bridge crew. The screen went black. On the long-range scanners, the Rethkul cruiser turned. Its engines flared with a bright, angry blue light. It didn't jump to warp with a flourish. It simply left, moving quickly toward the edge of the system, retreating from a fight it couldn't afford to win. The station settled. The low-frequency vibration of the heavy cruiser was gone, replaced by the familiar, comforting hum of the life support systems. Orson stood up and stretched. His joints popped in the quiet of the command deck. "Benton," Orson said. "Yeah, Orson. Call Kira and Varric. Tell them to stop worrying about the ale. I want them on the external hull with the pressure washers. That grease is going to bake into the sensors if we leave it there." "They aren't going to like that," Benton said. "Tell them it's a safety requirement," Orson said. He picked up his plastic cup and headed for the door. "And tell them if they do a good job, I won't charge them for the water they use." Orson walked down the corridor toward his quarters. The air was cool, the deck plates were solid. He passed a maintenance droid that was spinning in a circle, confused by the recent gravity shifts. He gave it a gentle kick with his boot to reset its sensors. The universe was a big place, full of warriors and kings and gods. But as far as Orson Driftwood was concerned, it was just one giant machine. And as long as you knew where the grease went and how to read the fine print, you could keep it running forever. He closed his door and turned off the lights. Outside, the stars were silent. For the first time in 12 hours, so was the station. It was the best sound he had heard all day.